the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today's question is: how does overcoming life's biggest challenges shape a business mindset? How does it create a better or a more improved business mindset? How does overcoming all of that help us become a better entrepreneur, so to speak? Well, Fred may have a very, very interesting answer to that question. He is the guest for today, the man who is joining us on this episode. Fred Bass is a serial entrepreneur who has overcome stage 4 cancer, where he was given a 20% chance to live. He battled depression due to treatment and rebuilt his mindset. He planted and grew a church to over 600 before his cancer, and he built a $1.6 million painting business since then. He is an author, motivational speaker, and business mindset coach. And today he is going to offer his insight and his wisdom and his stories, because we love stories on here. Fred, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me on, Joshua.
Fred, it's a remarkable story. I always like to begin with the origin. Where did this all begin? Your journey is incredibly inspiring. First off, the cancer. It completely must have dramatically shifted your life. What was it like before and after the diagnosis and after the treatment?
The cancer came out of nowhere. I had no symptoms at all. So it was
Wow.
a total surprise, a real God thing how it was caught. I was actually at my son's dermatology appointment when it was
Wow.
found. Wasn't
Wow.
even my appointment. So I had never really had any health issues, very healthy. I played sports growing up and
Wow.
planted the church and was leading that for about 12 years.
Mm.
And and then when I took my son to the dermatologist the night before, my daughter said, "Dad, that thing on your knee is gross." I had a little wart on my knee,
Wow.
and I didn't think anything about it. So at the appointment, I asked the doctor, "Can you cut stuff like this off?" Just curious. Wasn't
Mm.
even worried. And she looked
Wow.
at it and said, "I don't like the looks of that," and cut it off at my son's appointment. And a week later called me and told me, "This is serious. It's deeper than what we got, and you need to have surgery."
Oh my goodness. Fred, what cancer was it particularly?
Malignant melanoma, the major
Oh,
killer.
okay. That is truly major. And when they found out, it was already stage 4.
It was stage 3 when they found it, and then I had a surgery and they removed it, and then they tested my lymph nodes and found it in my lymph nodes also, which moved to stage 4, which is
That's
an
it.
internal organ.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. And that's
And
why
then
you
I had
had,
to have a second surgery.
that's it. This after the surgery, you had to get treatment for it, and which gave you, it must have felt really, how did it feel? You said you battled depression due to your treatment. How was that like, Fred?
So I went through a new drug that they were testing, and I was actually the first person in the state of Indiana to take it.
Wow.
It was the only form that my insurance would pay for, and the drug was $10,000 a shot. I got it every week. But
It's
my insurance covered most of it, so that
okay.
was okay, and it was a blessing. Um, so the first month or two it didn't really affect me too much. Initially, I definitely had a reaction the first day, but then I got adjusted to it and I was still working out a lot. And then eventually I just started to feel a lot of the side effects they said I could feel.
Hmm.
They listed 12 of them and I experienced all of them to the extreme.
Hmm.
I ended up starting to feel um, a little bit of fear. They
Right.
told me that because the brain was getting attacked, that the chemical reaction that my brain would have is
Wow.
releasing fear and doom.
Oh my
So I started
goodness.
to feel that. I didn't want to be with anybody except my wife. I ended up getting insomnia. I didn't sleep for 2 weeks straight one time. I was
Hmm.
literally going
Oh
crazy.
my goodness.
Ended up losing about 25 pounds, lost my appetite, and then went through severe depression, anxiety attacks. I'd never experienced anything like that before in my
Wow.
life. I'd get a tingling up the back of my neck, and then I would
Wow.
start to be afraid, and I ended up getting almost suicidal and had
Wow.
to be checked into the hospital. And I took the drug for about 6 months and it had a compounding effect on my
Yes.
body.
Yes.
And then eventually I just had to stop. And then I was just at a really bad place because my brain was very, very off with the
Hmm.
chemicals and
Hmm.
very depressed, could not think positive thoughts, had
Hmm.
negative ruminating thoughts all the time, and was not me, completely not
Wow.
me. I was an
Wow.
athlete growing up. I was always able to be positive.
Wow.
So it took me about 2 years to
Two
recover.
years. Oh my goodness.
I
Fred,
went through medication treatment and psychologists and things.
Fred, you look healthy right now. You look
Oh,
absolutely, it
it's
looks,
been over 12 years.
it's just, but it's an amazing story. It's still a remarkable, even if it's like it's been over 12 years ago. I mean, that was an incredible adversity that you just went through. It felt like it wasn't just the treatment, it wasn't just an internal sickness, right? A physical sickness that you were battling. You had to battle so much more deeper than that. And it's probably must have felt worse that it was caused by the chemical that was meant to cure you that actually gave you more illness to deal with. But how has that shaped you? How has that shaped your life and your mindset going through that experience, Fred?
Well, at the time, it was very depressing and discouraging because I had to step away from the church because I was just
Wow,
not at a good place.
of
So
course.
I merged it with another church, and then I didn't have a job.
Hmm.
So then I not only was dealing with depression, I didn't have a job, and I also felt like I failed because
No, my
that's what I
goodness.
felt like God wanted me to do
Hmm.
is lead this church and grow it. I love sharing my faith with people, and
Hmm.
I was starting over at 42 years old.
Wow. Wow.
So I went into teaching elementary education,
Okay.
which was my undergrad degree, and I
Hmm.
taught fourth grade for a few years, and then I taught STEM, science, technology, engineering, and
Hmm.
math.
Hmm.
And I studied how the brain works a lot during that time
Okay.
period because I was really curious.
Right.
And what I started to learn about the brain helped me rebuild my mindset
Hmm.
and ended up where uh, a lot of the things I believed in my faith, I felt like science was just showing the truth about it. So, for instance, I learned that when you have negative ruminating thoughts, the only way to get rid of them is to speak something positive out loud, to break
Mm.
it in your
Wow.
in your mind.
Fantastic.
Well, scripture says faith comes from hearing and that you have
I
to take
love it.
captive your thoughts. And so there were a lot of things that as I studied the science, it
Hmm.
really helped me understand how to
Yeah,
rebuild my mind. And then
that's
when I
it.
taught computer science programming, I learned that computers were designed to mimic the brain.
Yes, yes.
And so if you want to draw and you only have Word program, then you have to
Uh-huh.
install a new program.
Yes, of course.
So that's when I started learning about how to replace negative limiting mindsets with positive abundant truths
Wow.
and just that whole process. So I just kind of rebuilt my mind during that time period.
This I love that. I love, of course, that you related to um uh, faith, of course, and positivity, so to speak, like affirmations, giving yourself affirmations to rebuild that mindset. Fred, it must have been, like you said, it must have been incredibly disappointing that you had to leave your church because of your cancer, but you went on to be a successful business coach. It's quite the transition as well. You went from teaching and of course your $1 million painting as well to business coaching. Talk to us about that transition and what happened, the journey in between.
So when I taught, I took a huge pay cut in half because I had done very well with the church plant,
Okay.
growing it.
Okay.
So I needed more income, so I started a painting business on the side.
Okay.
And that was my college, high school job. And so I
Hmm.
knew the field. And so I started that and sent some emails to people and ended up getting busy work pretty quick.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so I built a small team. And for 3 years while I taught, I built the business.
Okay.
So I would teach full time, and then on my breaks, I would do bids, and then I
Hmm.
would go check the team after work, and then I would do
Hmm.
bids in the evening. And I built that the first 3 years of this, I mean, the last 3 years of teaching. So when I started it, I really didn't have the plan to start a business. It was
Hmm.
just we needed the income. My daughter was getting married, and my wife said, "Well, why don't you paint?" And I said, "I don't want to paint," but I'm glad I did. So the first year, I did 100,000 in business revenue, and all I cared about was it paid for my daughter's wedding. So I was happy. Well, the next
Wow.
year I did 100,000 again, and I thought, wait a second, this is like a viable business.
Wow.
So then I decided I wanted to double it. So the next year I did 200,000 in business.
Wow. Interesting. Wow.
Then I started to realize this could be something I could do and move out of teaching. And
Hmm.
so the next year it grew by another 100,000. And then I stepped away from teaching, doubled it again, and so grew it into about a $500,000 painting company each year. And I've sold over 1.6 million in the 7 years I've owned it. And I stepped away from teaching when I turned 50 4 years ago, and now just run the painting business. But people started asking me how I did it. How did you double it? Could you
Right.
help
There
me,
you
my
go.
business? And that's when I
Hmm.
got into coaching.
Wow, that's very interesting because you teach what you call or what you have right now is called principled business coaching, principled success coaching. And it's a very interesting because you read it, you see it, and people hear your story and it almost feels like it's self-explanatory, right? Principled success. But at the same time, you went from painting to into coaching. How do you think these principled success or principles applied when it came to your paintings, and why do you feel like it was so successful?
So when I started having people asking me how you did it, I had to think about how I did. I didn't know how
Hmm.
I did. I just did it. I kind of discovered later in life that God wired me as an entrepreneur.
Wow.
Uh, I planted the church because I felt that's what I was called to do, supposed
Hmm.
to do. I didn't
Hmm.
do it because I was an entrepreneur.
Right.
But as I look back, I realize I love building teams. I'm good at
Hmm.
it.
Hmm.
I think entrepreneurial. And so that's why the church was successful, that God helped me use my gifts and abilities. Well, then when I built the painting business, I realized that I used the same principles that I built the church with, I built my
Interesting.
painting business with.
Interesting.
And so so that's when I just started doing a lot of reflecting. And then I started my podcast where I just started teaching the principles that I
Mm.
that I function by,
Yes.
and so a lot of those principles come from scripture, but they also come from a lot of things I've read, just from other um, just positive
Right.
entrepreneurs, or
That's it.
uh,
Yeah.
self-help things I've studied, or science,
Hmm.
and I kind of put it all together. Some
Hmm.
people um, have a hard time putting faith and like
Business.
positive self-help or business together,
Mm.
and I don't see a disconnect. I think they work
Right.
together.
They have to, yes, somehow,
Yeah.
somehow, because like you said, I feel like with the coaching that you do, it feels like success doesn't just come, you know, naturally, so to speak. It has to come with a form of like principles, right? And one of these I feel is that you've helped build yourself or rebuilt your mindset is using self-affirmations, positive affirmations. What would those affirmations be? And Fred, talk through us through some principles of how to be successful, or what principles do you need to be successful? And is positive affirmations one of those things?
Yeah, definitely. I One of the principles I teach is the gratitude principle.
Wow, I love that. I love
The
that.
power of when you focus on what is good in your life and what you have been blessed with, you open yourself up to receive more.
I love that. I love that.
But when you don't, you close yourself off.
That's it. That's it.
So that's a huge one for me.
Mhm.
Another principle I teach is what I call the good soil principle.
Mm.
Jesus taught a parable of a farmer planting seed in different
Mhm.
kinds of soil, and only one type of the soil was good. The rest
Right.
was rocky
Right.
or hard.
Yes.
And there's actually a leadership bell curve that has the four different types of people. And I have
Oh,
put those two
interesting.
things together and helped people understand how to find good soil people in their life and how to be a good soil person.
I
Does
love
that make
that.
sense?
I love that. I was going to ask you next on how you were applying faith and what you learned in church and really God-given principles, God-given strength, that using that to your advantage into business. And you kind of just answered that. Could you give us one more principle that is more faith-based and something that you picked up along the way that you're applying now in your business coaching? And what would that be?
Sure. Another principle that I teach is called the wilderness principle.
Hmm.
And that is that all of us have to go through the wilderness sometimes, hard, difficult
That's it.
things, in
Hmm.
order to get to the next level of success.
Hmm.
In scripture, the Israelites, God's people, had to go through the wilderness before they got to the promised land,
Hmm.
but they never made it. They were right at the edge of their promised land
Yes.
because they got stuck in their mindset
Yes.
uh, of being stuck in the wilderness.
That's it.
They weren't grateful. They didn't trust God. They didn't
That's
trust
it.
their leader. They didn't believe in themselves. And
Right.
so they were constantly complaining and whining about their life,
Hmm.
and they didn't make it. But the next generation, God
Hmm.
raised up a leader, Joshua,
Hmm.
after Moses,
Yes.
and he said, "We're going." And the next generation decided to move forward. And here's what I
That's it.
learned from that principle is that you stay in the law in the wilderness however long you choose.
That's it.
It's your
Hmm.
attitude. So if you go into the wilderness thinking, why me? What's going
Yeah.
on with every situation? You'll never get out. But if you go in there knowing the only reason God puts us through the wilderness, hard times, is to prepare us for our next level of success, the promises He has for us,
Hmm.
well, then I'm going to be looking for what can I learn? What can I grow? What do I need to let go of? As
Hmm.
soon as I learn my lessons, I move out of the wilderness and I move into what's next for my life.
That's it. I love that. And it goes back and it ties back to what you went through 12 years ago, this severe, discovery that upended your life. It flipped it together, flipped, flipped it, flipped it over, but you got through it. You got through it with faith and you got through it with the mindset that has shaped you to who you are now today. Fred, I love it. I love that you are teaching these same principles, especially, there aren't that many business coaching that applies faith and that applies, any God-centric principles. Fred, to start wrapping this up, I'd love to give you this opportunity. Where can we find you? Where can we learn more about you? Where can we learn more and find out about principled success coaching?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also my website, principledsuccesscoaching.com.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, you could even share my email if you want to with people. It's fredbase2 at gmail.com.
Hmm.
And then I have my podcast that's on Apple and on a couple different platforms, which is just called Principled Success.
Yep.
Some of them are called Fred Talk because that's my book is
That's
called
also
Fred Talk,
your book. There you go. Yes.
yeah, on
It's
Amazon.
it's a great way to kind of put it because if you want to learn more about Fred's story, check out that book. Go grab yourselves a copy. It's everywhere out there. Fred, it's been great. I love the principles that you've shared with us today. One last bit of wisdom to leave behind with the audience and the listeners. What would it be? Take us home.
I would just say I think God has wired everyone uniquely to accomplish a purpose.
I love
And
that.
so I talk to people about finding your superpower strength zone
That's it. Wow, I love that.
and understanding who He made you to be, accepting that, enjoying who you are, and realizing that every day is an opportunity to just step into who He already has you to be. You don't need to prove yourself to anybody. Just
Mhm.
be the person that God made you to be. And that's usually what makes people the best leaders.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Be who you are. God already gave you that purpose. Just find out what it is.
Yeah.
Brett, it's been great. Thank you so much for the episode. Thank you so much for coming on. To all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as we did. And we will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.